the impact and the damage of the lockdowns was much worse in Canada and Australia and New Zealand because they had strong centralized governments, and it was weaker in the US because we had state governments. If it wasn't for Florida and Texas, we might not have ever reopened our economy. If we look at the past year, what you've got is a drawdown of all financial assets. So the NASDAQ is down about 22% over the past year. And so NASDAQ represents tech companies and all the risk assets. But on the other hand, if you were to go and look at like the bond market and the bond portfolios, bonds are down, like the BOND index, the long bond index, it's down almost 17% in the year. So for 30 or 40 years, you had this 60-40 bond portfolio. And the idea was if stocks work, then bonds will be a low return and stocks will be a high return. But if stocks trade down, people will shift their money to bonds, and the interest rates will go down, the bonds prices will go up, and you'll actually get a yield on your bond portfolio. But of course, that broke around March of 2020. And the reason it broke in March of 2020 is because interest rates got pegged to zero. So after we had lowered interest rates from 5%, 5.5% to 5 to 4.5 to 4 to 3.5 to 3 to 2.5 to 2 to 0, and left it at zero, then the debate was, can they take interest rates negative? If you can't take interest rates negative, then bonds don't act as a hedge to stocks anymore. I mean, you're at the end of the road for bonds. And what we saw with stocks is the Federal Reserve printed a bunch of money, pegged interest rates at zero, and then you saw all these risk assets explode. You saw the NASDAQ explode up and the S&P explode up. You had a K-shaped recovery. And in the K-shaped recovery, it's almost like the entire economy was in a train wreck or in a car wreck, and we got taken into the hospital and they pumped us full of morphine. And if you've ever been in a bad accident and then first you're in pain, and then they pump you full of painkillers, and then you actually feel pretty good. And you're sitting there and your arm is broken, but you're high on morphine or high on something, and you feel pretty good about it. And you're thinking, why don't I just go break my arm and do this all the time? And then at some point, there's part of your brain that says, I'm going to come home from the hospital and I'm going to get off this painkiller, and I'm going to be in great pain for the next 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. So I think what happened here is the Fed just pumped tons and tons of liquidity, and we stayed high for about a year and a half. And I remember when Jerome Powell said, "I'm not even thinking about raising interest rates," and said strongly that it'll be till 2024 before interest rates start coming up again. But here we are in 2022. And now instead of raising them a quarter point, each time, now they're raising them 75 basis points. So they're taking 3 steps at a time, multiple times. So we took the cost of money down faster than any time in history. And now we're jacking up the cost of money faster than any time in history. And the result is that all the traditional models are broken.